Notice there's also no punctuation mark after the name of the newspaper and before that date. All right. Then I have my colon and then my D1 plus. That plus says that this article is found on D1, and then it skips and will be found on some other pages. But it's a random skipping. So it might be D1 and then D2, and then it might skip to D5, and then it might skip to D9 before it finishes the article. It's a print source. The Hogney source, we have our title. New York Times, we have our date. Now, this one has a late edition. So notice that I put the date in first, comma, then late edition with the ED for edition. And then this one has a different way of numbering the sections. This one actually has section 11, page 1 plus. Again, the plus is going to stand for it's going to skip around in that section and not just be a consistent page. If I do 1-3, it's going to be on 1, 2, and 3. If I do 1-3, it's on 1 and 3 only. So how I punctuate this in there will tell my reader where this article or how this article appears. You notice that print is following at the end of each of these because these are traditional print sources that were located. Here's another New York Times one. This is a New England edition. And so again, we have a different variant that we have, especially with the New York Times. And this one actually has A13. Now, one of the things that students frequently miss here when I have this edition here, that ED is an abbreviation. So therefore, I have to do the ED period and then the colon. I know it looks goofy, but that's the way it is to be. We need to keep our punctuation in there. Remember, we're working with Modern Language Association. They expect our punctuation to be correct. And then it's a print. And then I have the Wall Street Journal. Remember, this is the exception. Yes, sir.
When you get newspaper information online, do you still just do it as the same?
I will follow the same format when I have a newspaper online as when I have a newspaper in this traditional print source. I will, when I find it online, add the source information for finding it on web. And I should have some examples of that for you. And actually, we're getting into the actual section with online sources where URLs are now limited value. The limited value because what we have found over the years with using these, we don't search by a URL. We search by either the title or the subject and sometimes the author. We don't search by URL as a general rule because the long, the cumbersome, the difficult to type, we make transcription errors as well. MLA decided, why are we doing this if we're not going to use them effectively to find the source? So they're very specific to a subscriber. You have access through our virtual library, through EBSCOhost and ProQuest and Opposing Viewpoints and some other sources out there. Once you leave Ivy Tech, you lose your access to that unless you sign up to the virtual library through the state of Indiana or through the state of where you are living. So we lose some of that access. You can go to the public library and get them as well. But then we generally lose a lot of access to that. So it's very specific to you as a student here at this campus. So that web address is not going to do someone at IU any good to follow that web address. When the source is difficult to locate without it, you will give it. When the instructor requires it, you will give it. Otherwise, you don't need it. Okay? Or if it's needed for supplemental information. Those are the basic rules. So when you will give a web address today and type those long cumbersome addresses. So it's really been streamlined. I'm going to show the database and not the database service. So Academic Search Premier is one of the databases. It's one of the premier databases in EBSCOhost. I also have Newspaper Source, Master File Premier, so I have some others in there, but this is one of the main ones out there. I will no longer say what library I was located at when I got the source, whether I was here at Ivy Tech in Terre Haute or Ivy Tech in Bloomington. I'm not going to say which one I was at. If the pagination is not available, I will use that no page, just not in italics. And if the posted date or last update date is not available, I'm going to have to use no date, N period, D period, abbreviation for it. And you need to do your looking. Sometimes down at the bottom, very teeny tiny of an online source, you'll find a date. And those are the dates that I will use. So some examples. The first one is an interview. But notice I don't have a date. So I'm going to use an abbreviation, no date. So I also have in here the Darkey Archive Press, and then I repeat Darkey Archive Press. Notice that I'm using a capital P for press without an abbreviation. It is an acceptable abbreviation on this page only for MLA. Then web, and then the date of access. The evangelistic source is a review of a book, and we have an editor as well with John Law and Lane Ostermark Johansson in Victorian Studies, which is a journal. I have a volume and issue, and then this one came from Academic Search Premier and the web. Notice again I have the page numbers. I'm not using the abbreviation for page. Notice that never, in all of these sources we've looked at right now, have we used the abbreviation for page at this point. Okay. We also have the Smith-Nieto Political Side of Bilingual Education. This is Arcane at Rutgers. That's actually the name of the journal. And it has that little strange ampersand in there. So, at symbol. And then we have no page, web, and the date. So when you don't have a page number that you can use, you are to use and hold that place with no page out there for online sources. Be careful with some .com sites. In some places, .com is part of the name. Some places it is not. If I go out to CNN.com, that .com is part of the name. But if I go out to FoxNews.com, .com is not part of the name. So be careful. There's no real rhyme or rule of when or how they would select that this is part of the name. So we just have to look. Okay. So I have Boyle, Anthony T., Utopian Message to Daniel Cahill, and this is an email source.